So tell me your approach when you are kind of designing, if you will, your network.
Sure. So I started by doing it wrong.
Most of us do. Yeah, most of us do.
When you're driven, the need to accomplish a goal is relentless. Hard work and ambition compel you to do whatever's necessary. In my work as a personal injury trial lawyer for 18 years, it's common to meet driven people. Those with drive can have different personalities, careers, or backgrounds, but they possess one common factor. Despite their passions, driven people want to surround and motivate themselves with other driven people. If you want to learn how to overcome obstacles by learning from others, then tune in here. This is the Driven Crowd Podcast.
Thank you for tuning into episode 34 of the Driven Crowd Podcast, fueled by Snellings Law. I'm your host, Scott Snellings. Today, we have an extra special guest joining us on the podcast, my good friend and law partner, Rocio Gosewehr Hernandez. Originally from El Salvador, Rocio and her family moved to North Texas when she was just 3 years old. She's a fellow Plano East and Baylor graduate. Rocio then went on to law school at Notre Dame and quickly returned home after finding out how much she hates the cold weather. She's married to her high school crush, Ryan, and has two amazing daughters, Alessandra and Eva. Rocio, welcome to the Driven Crowd Podcast.
Thank you for having me, Scott.
We were talking beforehand. Was this going to be weird because we just had coffee together this morning and then we had a leadership L10 meeting. And so this is just a continuation of the conversation from, I guess it started at 8 a.m. this morning, right?
It's Rocio and Scott Day.
That's right. Rocio and Scott Day. We get to hang out together all day long. All right. So for those people who don't know you, give us a little bit about your background. Where were you born? Where'd you grow up? I just told everybody you were born in El Salvador, but tell us about that.
Yes. So brief stint in El Salvador before my family moved to the U.S. Texas Instruments, TI, brought us over. So we came with a bunch of Salvadorans who are not related to me, but they are all family now.
Awesome. And so when you came over here at the young age of 3, I believe, is it 3 years old?
3.
Okay. Did you speak any English or were you straight Spanish?
Straight Spanish. So my sisters were in a ESL type program. I got thrown into a church daycare and was told, figure it out.
There you go.
But I
That is
learned
immersion.
English very quickly, as did my sisters. A lot of people don't believe we speak Spanish until they hear us do it because we didn't end up with much of an accent.
No, not at all. You sound absolutely like a native speaker, but I'm sure a lot of that has to do with being over at 3 years old too, right? Your mind is still very malleable.
Yes, absolutely. And my parents were determined for us to speak English well. So it was definitely immersion, no accommodations, TV, everything, figure it out, learn some English.
Awesome. How much of that do you think has contributed to how you are today? Because as I can attest to, you're very much still a figure it out and let's get moving on it kind of person.
Yeah. And just kind of going back to my parents, they weren't the kind to really hold our hands or shelter us from things. They were just like, we'll be here to support you, but this is the new challenge. This is the new adventure. We're going to do this.
Awesome. And so as you kind of grew up here, at what point did you decide that, hey, I think I want to be a lawyer?
That was a very long road. I was in college for a good while, thinking I wanted to do medicine, thinking that medical school was the route for me. And then I fell in love with philosophy, the subject, took a bunch of courses in that. And pretty much all of my philosophy professors were like, you are a lawyer in the making. You should consider this, try it out. My first internship was actually in this building many moons ago, where I interned for a family law firm. And yeah, between the internships, scoring really high on the law school admission test, I was like, okay, I see what they see, that this is something that naturally interests me and that I might actually be really good at.
Awesome. Yeah. So you were more kind of pushed in that direction, whereas I kind of tripped and fell backwards into the profession.
Yes.
So you graduated from Baylor. Why Notre Dame? Why up in the super cold tundra?
Sure. So I didn't actually practice any religion or go to a church or anything like that when I was growing up. I had come to the faith as a teenager at the end of high school, and Baylor was a great place for me to go to college and learn and grow and all of that. And in keeping with that theme, I was like, I'm going to go to a pretty religious law school as well. And I got to study end-of-life issues and where the law intersects with ethics and a lot of things like that at Notre Dame that I think were really good for me in my academic pursuits, but also my spiritual growth as well.
Awesome. Yeah. So kind of tapped into that philosophy major a little bit with those type subjects.
Yes. I've always been one to ask the big questions and wonder why, challenge authority, all of those things. And both of those schools were really actually very good for that.
So tell me this, when you went to law school, did you have any idea what kind of law you wanted to practice?
No, I had none. I had only interned in family law. I actually interned in family law before going to law school, which was kind of a rare opportunity, but I knew I didn't want to do that.
Hey, just as important as figuring out what you do want to do.
But no, I just, I was going to try different things out and I was going to find something that was a good fit. I've always said if something's worth doing, it's worth doing right. It's worth doing well. It's worth doing with all your heart. And so I wasn't going to go somewhere that required that I be complacent or that I be, just earning a salary. I wanted to do something that I really was excited about.
Yeah. So I was kind of the opposite. As you well know, I ended up going to law school to become a personal injury attorney. Absolutely nothing else interested me, even in the least. And so I know I'm one of the few. Most people have no idea what they want to do when they end up in law school. They just want to be a lawyer. And I think that's how so many of our friends and colleagues end up in these weird areas of the law that they knew nothing about, had no idea that it was interesting to them, but yet they get kind of almost pushed into that direction or fall into that direction and figure out, hey, this is actually really cool. I like this. I'm good at this. So you end up where out of law school?
So initially, I go to Bryan College Station. I followed my sweetheart and my heart to College Station, where Ryan had graduated from A&M, was working at the university. That's where his roots were. And I was like, I'll try it out again to follow my heart. I got a job by essentially submitting resumes to every law firm in town. And
Who will have me?
Yes, especially targeted ones that had a large Spanish-speaking clientele. I've been bilingual my whole life, and I wanted to use it. I heard back from this law firm that was not hiring. They didn't have any positions open. But they really liked my letter. They really liked my application materials. So they had me come in for kind of an informal, meet everyone interview. Half of it was in Spanish. And at the conclusion of that, it was just kind of, well, if we don't hire her, she's our competition. So we better hire her.
Go find room in the budget.
So it was awesome because my first law firm experience was largely with the Spanish-speaking community. We actually did a radio program there, Consejos Legales, where we gave legal advice, preliminary legal advice in Spanish on air on Saturday mornings to potential clients.
And what kind of work were you doing there?
We were only doing family law and criminal law as far as my practice. They had a personal injury wing of the firm, but I did not do personal injury then. Okay.
And so how long were you doing that before you figured, I don't know that this is the right thing for me?
Sure. So the criminal law was what kept me interested.
Okay.
I did a lot of court-appointed work. I did mental health appointments, CPS appointments. The judges were very much trying to integrate me into the community. They would send me all kinds of court-appointed work to do. So that's what kept me at that firm for that long. I was enjoying the criminal law component, really not enjoying the family law component. But when I was ready to move back to Dallas area, Plano in particular, Ryan and I were talking about getting married, starting a family. Where do we want to do that? Is Bryan College Station the place for us? Our support system is all here in Plano.
Yeah.
I live down the street from my in-laws, a block away from my parents, walking distance from my sister, and I knew I wanted to come back. And I figured if we're going to have a fresh start geographically, if we're going to have, kind of a clean slate, let's do that in a different field of law. And I was really fortunate. A couple of guys out in Roy City took a chance on me and said, you know nothing about personal injury law.
Perfect.
Let's go defend multi-million-dollar lawsuits together. So that's how I started in personal injury, was catastrophic personal injury defense. I was one of the bad guys.
Yeah. Well, hey, I was one of the bad guys too. I worked for a big Dallas firm right out of law school doing products liability defense. So same thing, catastrophic injuries, nasty stuff, but an amazing learning environment. So right out of law school, for those people who don't know, law school teaches you a lot of book stuff. I think some law schools do a good job of teaching you some of the practical things. Like I think Baylor did a great job for me. I don't know about Notre Dame. I know you were involved in moot court, mock trial stuff, so you probably got quite a bit of it too.
Yeah.
But the vast majority of lawyers, when you come out of law school, you have no idea what you're doing. And so right out of school, your first job is really almost like a residency, right? They throw you into the deep end and you just got to figure stuff out. And you can ask questions, but most law firms don't have any real formal training programs. And so with that in mind, at your first law firm, did you just get thrown into the deep end, or did you have some sort of a training that you went through?
With both the first and the second, I really got thrown in. And so obviously the first was criminal and family. I'd had a couple of internships in that, so I didn't feel like I was completely clueless. But especially going into personal injury litigation, I had no idea what we were going to do. One of our first big cases, one of the partners is like, you're going to depose the wife of the guy who's terribly injured, go draft an outline. And I'm like, is there a reference or a book or like, what are we trying to figure out from her? I had no idea. But I just went in and I did a draft and did my best, and then went back for the feedback of, what do I really need to know? I will say it was a little bit different from what we do, right? We have a very process-based onboarding. Our new attorneys get a ton of access to the senior level attorneys, to our partners. It wasn't really like that. It really was more, yes, there are some reference materials, but you're going to do 90% of the work yourself, and we're just kind of here to keep you in the lanes.
So what would you recommend for brand new attorneys just graduating? They end up in that situation, right? The thrown into the deep end. What would you recommend? What would you do if it was you in terms of trying to get it all figured out? How do you grow, and how do you make yourself indispensable? This is especially for those of you who are in law school or thinking about law school. Yeah,
I think a lot of my attitude has been to make the most of the experience, right? Mm-hmm. What skills do you have that you can build on, or, that you can use at that time? So I knew, even as a criminal attorney, as a family law attorney, I didn't like the stress of it, obviously, and some of those pressures and drama of the actual issues of the family law case. But I was like, I have no problem being in court. Right. I have no problem being in front of people. So if the attorneys had a trial coming up, I was like, okay, that's something that I know I want to get better at. I know I want to be in front of people. I know I want to be talking to decision makers. Opt in. If you can ask for, hey, can I shift these responsibilities off and include these? Obviously, respectfully, obviously, as what you're bringing to the team. Here's my skill set. Utilize it. With that kind of mentality, I think people will create room for you if they know you have a certain skill set to offer, even if you're lacking in other areas.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, one of the things that I did is, I was assigned, hey, write a case evaluation. Right? I'm sure you're familiar with case evaluations.
Oh, yes.
And so I was like, I don't know how to do this. And so I was like, okay, well, what are some similar cases, right? Like we were in the seatback team. We defended seatback cases. And so I went and I found like 10 of them and figured out, okay, here's what they're doing. Here's where they're getting the information from. And I was like, I don't understand like the mechanics part of this, the engineering part of it. And so I went and I found, we had this big room that had just nothing but reference materials on CBAC. So I went and I found trial transcripts, I found depositions, and I basically taught myself. And in those depositions, when there were articles referenced, I would go find the articles. And I think really pouring in and just doing everything you can, for me, in every spare minute, those first few years to get up to speed, one, it helps you become better, but two, you develop that trust. Right? Because all of a sudden I was the person that the partners could go to. I was the person that other attorneys could come to because they knew I either had the answer or knew where to go get the answer.
Yeah, absolutely. And to just kind of piggyback off of that, I think there's people who are ready and willing to be your mentor that aren't necessarily within the walls of your law firm. I've had people every step of the way giving me guidance. I remember having a hearing in one courtroom, and I honestly wasn't sure how to take it when the judge faxed in some case law to our office and was like, "For Rocio" on the cover page. I was like, initially, did I miss something? Did I misunderstand something? And I was like, no, this actually sounds like it's just supplementing my knowledge base. It's a gift. It's somebody trying to teach me. It's somebody trying to make me better. Woman judge, by the way. But I think there's plenty of people looking to help, to guide you, to mentor you, to show you the ropes. And if they're not in your law firm, go find them outside of your law firm.
And it's amazing to me too, kind of the more I've been around really successful attorneys, those are the ones who are really willing to share the most, right? They want to pass on. They know that you're not a competitor to them. They want you to thrive too. And I think that goes outside of the law firm. Successful people want to pass on knowledge, right? They want others to succeed because they have that abundance mindset. They're not hoarding information. And if people don't have that in their lives, then be proactive. Go ask, be assertive, obviously in a respectful way, but go find those people who can help you thrive.
Absolutely. And I know, we've been asked when we're interviewing attorneys for jobs, what's the most important core value to you? And for me, it's humble confidence every day of the week, because I'm like, those are the people who can pass on knowledge. Those are the people who can absorb knowledge. Like you said, the best attorneys are more than willing to share that knowledge with you. I read something the other day. It said the people at the bottom are competing. The people at the top are collaborating. Right. And I think if you have that mindset of, there's only room for a few of us and we have to be competitive and we have to guard secrets, that's going to limit your ability to grow as much as it's going to limit your ability to help others grow. But if you come in with that humble confidence, that's the people that flourish.
Absolutely. And my favorite core value.
Do I?
You do. Extreme ownership, which goes hand in hand with that, right? You got to have the humility to understand that you're not perfect, that you're going to screw up. And when you do, because it will happen, own it. Own it right off the bat. And when you do that, you establish trust in people, right? Because everybody's going to screw up. I mean, I've probably already screwed up twice today. I hadn't realized it yet, but I'm sure I have. And take that ownership and say, hey, look, you know what? Here's what I'm going to do to get better. Here's a proposed solution. And here's how we are going to make sure this doesn't happen moving forward. And I think that's a huge virtue to have too. And then especially if you're looking for mentors, when they see that, guess what? They're going to fight even harder for you and work harder to teach you because you are teachable, which is huge. All right, so let's talk a little bit about leadership. I know that's one of your favorite topics. It's one of mine too. It was funny. I was at a conference this last weekend, and a law firm conference. And one of the things that a speaker was talking about is where we fail is we don't invest enough money in our own self-development, and just as importantly, the development of the team. Give me your thoughts on that.
I think money's definitely part of it. I think just resources in general, and just kind of going back to my comparison earlier about some of the law firms that, I was at early in my career versus what we have built together. Having those resources, having the availability of time to invest into those people that you're trying to help succeed in this practice. I think that's huge. There's always people to learn from. There's always more to learn. Our state legislature changes the laws every 2 years.
Right.
So we're never going to run out of material to get a refresher on, new way of doing things. Now this obstacle is up. How do we work around it to succeed anyways? I think that's just an ongoing process with being an attorney, and especially the kind of work that we do. The landscape is always changing,
right.
And you've got to make sure that your team, yourself, you're able to keep up with that. And part of that is, being on the practitioner side. Part of that is on the leadership side. I feel like I've grown as a leader tremendously throughout my career. I remember the first time I went to an event with attorneys. It was actually at a jewelry store, Montelongo's Jewelry, and they had appetizers and wine and everything. And I made Ryan go with me, my husband, and kind of hung on his arm. And I was like, why am I here? Everybody's older. They all know what they're talking about. I don't have a clue what's going on. Now I try to find those people in a room and make sure that they're comfortable. But I think I've learned a lot. And I mean, even this year, I've had to. In the last 2 to 3 years, our team has grown substantially. I don't have 1 or 2 people to answer to. We have 10 or 11 to answer to. And I think part of being a good leader to them is being someone who inspires them, being someone who makes them better than they were when you found them, being someone who finds their strengths and harnesses that, helps that grow. But I think the other side of that is meeting them where they're at. Trying to figure out, what does this person need? It's not a one-size-fits-all role to be a leader. Some people need you to lead in different ways. Some need more grace. Some need more accountability. Some need more structure. Some need more just understanding. Everybody's going to be a little bit different. But how do you, at the same time, meet people where they're at, but also take them where you're going, which is the next level?
Absolutely. And as we've both found, the more people you add, the harder that becomes. And so one of the other things that they were talking about is, in terms of that, where firms fail, is they don't hire enough leaders, right? They hire operators. They hire people who are good at specific jobs, but then they don't find the ones who kind of have that innate leadership potential and bring them up. Because as you grow, I mean, there's no way even Rocio can manage, 20 people, not effectively, certainly not on the level that you're talking about, where it's individual tactics, right? Hey, you're going to handle person A different than you're going to handle person B, which is completely different than A or B when you're talking with C. And so, did I confuse you there? That was a lot of letters.
It's a logic game.
There
I got it.
Logic game. Hey, you're a philosophy major. But yeah, and so creating those leaders to kind of manage the next level is huge. And then, at our firm, we're at that point. We're trying to figure out, okay, where is that next level of leadership? How do we groom them? How do we pour into them, not just operationally, but from a leadership perspective too? And it's hard. It's really hard. But I think in a lot of law firms, a lot of companies in general, there's zero thought for that. We were talking this morning about intentional leadership and unintentional leadership. You came up with that term, or at least that's the first time I'd heard it. Tell me kind of where you're coming from on that.
Sure. So, I've served in very specifically dictated, defined, titled leadership roles. I've been on a board. I've been a co-chair. I've done all these roles that I was assigned a leadership position. Everyone in the room knew this is one of the leaders of our organization. What I didn't realize early on in my career was how many people are watching, how many can learn from you, how many can be inspired by you, simply by you existing, you doing what you do, doing it well. You just kind of grow a following of people. And part of that is, social media. Part of that is that you and I are always up for speaking engagements, the different community organizations that we're in, even just as a member. I've really realized there's way more eyes watching you than you originally thought. And sometimes it surprises you. One of our interns that we had, Alyssa Rodriguez, brilliant. She's actually interning at the 5th Court of Appeals. She has a bright future ahead. I told her one day I'm going to call you judge. I have no doubt. She's right. Just a rock star. And then I got this letter from her. It was the heartfelt message about how I had been the mentor she wanted me to be, or she didn't know she needed at that point in time, and what a difference I made. And I was just surprised because I was like, yeah, obviously we were in a firm and I was one of the leadership people there, and she was one of our interns, but I didn't seek to, have a mentee, to build that relationship, to have that as an ongoing relationship. But even without me putting in that much effort, like I do with some of the mentees that I have, she had felt like I made a big difference in her life. And I've heard it from her. We've heard it, from people we went to school with. Every time my mom has a career day at her school, she's like, come speak Spanish. They need to see someone like them,
right.
Succeeding in this way. And I'm like, I didn't set out to become a lawyer so that I could tell people, don't work cleaning a school, come be a lawyer. Yeah, like that wasn't the intention of why I got there. But when you realize you have that sphere of influence and what a difference you can make in how people see themselves, I think it's important to jump at that opportunity.
And I don't know if you felt the same way, but the first time I realized that there's people that I don't know that listen to this podcast. There's people that see our social media that I don't know. But whenever I hear something from them, boy, leadership is a big responsibility, but unintentional leadership is like that much bigger of a weight, right? Because you have people who you don't know who are listening to you, and you're not leading them directly, but you're setting the example. And that's just that much more to think through in every decision you make is, hey, am I living out my own core values? Am I living out the firm's core values? Am I living according to my faith? Because all it takes is one example for you to stumble, and all of a sudden you have a whole bunch of people who were relying on you that you've just disappointed.
Yeah, I think it's definitely important to live by your priorities. And you've really helped me with that while we've been together at the firm. I wouldn't take vacation. I wouldn't take time off in the beginning. I would say these amazing things about, how much my family means and rest and whatnot. Really good at preaching it to others. But because I hold myself to such a high standard in work and in the profession, I wasn't prioritizing those things. And now I'm more disciplined about it. I'm like, okay, this is coming up. The kids have a break. I need to make sure I have some days off in there. We haven't planned a trip this year. Let's make sure that ends up on the calendar. Just being more intentional about living your priorities especially when people are watching you. And I think that's true for faith. You've seen I've prioritized my health,
right? That
family time, the rest, all these different things that it's hard to do it all. It's hard to be great at all of them at the same time. But knowing that they're your priorities, really trying to keep them on the radar of this is something I need to take care of.
Yeah, there was another speaker this last week at the conference who he had a line and it just really resonated with me. And it was along the lines of, look, live life by design or live it by default. Because if you don't specifically design it out, then you're going to the default. And which would you prefer? Right. And so I think it's really easy for any professional, for anybody who is absorbed in their job or whose job requires a lot of them, to default into, all right, my work stuff is figured out. I got all that planned out. It's calendared. It's great. And then your family life priority, right, all of a sudden is by the wayside. And that's no longer a priority. And as with a lot of people I talk to, how do you go about doing that? How do you go about finding that time? How do you go about structuring it to, once again, we're not going to say the word balance because it's not balance. Work is life. How do you prioritize those things that are important to you in life?
Yeah, I think surrounding yourself with like-minded people is important.
Sure.
If you're surrounded by like-minded people with similar priorities, I think that's tremendous. And that was something that was huge for me in both of the mom groups I've been in. I was in the Dallas Moms in Law and then the Attorney Moms of Collin County. It's huge because we're all kind of in those same struggles, of like, well, the kids have needs and the job has demands and I'm supposed to be both places at once and it doesn't leave much left over for me. But when you have a community of people striving towards the same goal, figuring out those same responsibilities together, they encourage you. I've been in your shoes. You sound like you're near burnout. Take that little bit of time off. Having those conversations, having those people that will take that one little hearing for you or do whatever is necessary to get your kids home. It's huge. And so that's something that I've really experienced with the community of moms. I remember hearing one of the people I look up to very much, Judge Tanya Parker, speak, and she was talking about, certain women actually leave the profession. They say it's so hard to fit it all in, to do the job stuff and the mom stuff and the self-care. I'm just going to pick my battles and withdraw from the profession. And what a disservice that is, obviously, to those mothers. What a disservice that is to the profession, because we're losing some of our most brilliant minds by having an environment that isn't conducive to having it all, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, before people leave the profession, before they just kind of give up on one thing or the other, I would encourage them, try to find a community of people who are like-minded. if that means changing jobs, it means changing jobs. If it means going to hybrid, part-time, taking off for a season, but not leaving the profession altogether, just, you have these talents, you have these skill sets, you have this, for us, passion for helping people. Don't let it go to waste because it's hard. Find a way, find the support structure to make sure that you can do it.
Yeah, and surrounding yourself, to your point, with amazing people is so huge. You and I have both read that book, Who Not How, right? And it's kind of from a business perspective. Hey, don't go learn how to do marketing. Hire somebody who already knows how to do it, unless that's kind of your superpower. Don't try to figure out SEO. Go hire somebody to do that. And so I think the same thing personally too, right? Like, obviously there's cost constraints, but there's no cost constraint on friendship. Have those people around you who support you. Have those people around you who you can open up to. And all of a sudden you found, you've created a friendship. You've created someone who can help you too. But all of a sudden you find that your whole presence, your whole, your drive is completely next leveled. So your aspirations can go up a level because you've surrounded yourself with those people, and you have all of a sudden that support network that instead of worrying about how am I going to do this, this, and this, it's like, hey, now that we have this and this in place, now we can do X, Y, and Z, and give back to those friends in our network as well. So you're a big networker. That's one of the things that I love to talk about is networking. Tell me your approach, because we have different strengths when it comes to that. Absolutely. So tell me your approach when you are kind of designing, if you will, your network.
Sure. So I started by doing it wrong.
Most of us do. Yeah, most of us do.
I started by signing up for everything I could get into, showing up to every event that I could. If it hit my radar, I was going to be there. And over time, I realized the people that you can be most authentic with, the people who naturally are attracted to you, to your energy, to your drive, to whatever, those are the people you need to be around. The people with the commonalities. When I am in a networking situation and I'm able to forget that I'm networking, I'm enjoying the moment. I'm with people I want to be around. We're talking about the things I would want to talk about anyways. That's the optimal networking situation. So, I'm not, for example, into crafting. I'm not into race cars. I'm not going to go hang out with those groups, even if they invite me to go do something I'm not interested in. So obviously with the mom group, we had a lot of commonality there. Some of the women empowerment groups, not mom related, but still women empowerment groups, obviously drawn to those. I'm always happy to be the mentor or mentee in those kind of scenarios. And it's fun. It's a good time. The more that the things you have to do can fill you up and not just deplete you, the better it is.
Yeah, I know I've learned that the hard way. There's only so much of us to go around for any human, right? And if you can find ways to recharge, especially ways that are even productive, like what you're talking about, and I think we both thrive off of different things that we find in work. But the more that you can do that, the better off you are going to be physically, mentally, emotionally. And a lot of people struggle with that. So I love that point. Find something that you already enjoy doing and then try to turn that into a networking event. What's your thought process behind follow-ups? So say you meet somebody new and at an event, you hit it off. What's next?
So I know I've heard about people's love languages and these kind of things, and I don't want to be too cliche, but that's what I want to do. If I find somebody that we hit it off well, we enjoyed an event together, we had a good energy together, that's my first instinct is what can I give to them? And it doesn't have to be expensive and it doesn't have to be material. Some people are looking for that introduction that you can make to someone else. Some people are looking for that speaking opportunity that they haven't been able to get because they're not part of that network. Whatever I can do for somebody else that just makes them light up, just, giving to their favorite charity. We've done all of that for our clients, for all the people in our network. It's a little bit different for everyone. It does take some time. It does take some thought and some slowing down. But I love that. When we can give them something that's not uniform, that's usually my follow-up. Thank you so much for sending this client, or it was such a joy to meet you at this event. Here's something I can do for you.
Yeah, love it. One of the absolute worst things that we can ever do, I'm just going to harp on this till the day I die, and when everybody in the office hears this too, is not follow up. You meet somebody, you hit it off, and you're like, man, this could be really great for us. And then you just never follow up. You send an email, you don't send an email, you don't give them a call, you don't shoot them a text, you don't swing by their office, you don't invite them for coffee, and then it just goes cold. And then maybe you remember their name the next time, maybe you don't. But that is the absolute worst thing you can do. You've basically just wasted time.
Absolutely. We meet too many people to keep track of all of them without the follow-up. You've got to have that follow-up. As charming or amazing as you may be, do that follow-up to make sure you're remembered.
Yeah, because so few people do it, it will immediately make you memorable. Mm-hmm. So, okay. So tell me this. Are you a routine person?
Somewhat.
In some parts of your life or on some days, or tell me what you mean by that.
Sure. So I do like to have a pattern to the day.
Okay.
And both of my children are definitely more behaved, happier, cooperative if they know what to expect with the day. So if they know, for example, Fridays with the nanny is going to be fun Friday, they're expecting fun, right?
Right.
And the other days with the nanny, we're going to read together, we're going to math together, we're going to whatever.
Yeah.
And they know it and they expect it and it's fine. To that end, I love the routine. We have opportunities come up all the time that we can't anticipate, that we can't plan for, and I want people to know I'm a phone call away.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of, hey, Rocio, can you help with this? Hey, Rocio, I need someone to come to that. I have a question. I have whatever. I want to stay open to that. So to that level of spontaneity, I love it. I'm okay without a routine on that. And, we try to plan, for example, the work day. I try to have X number of hours that are pure work, right? I'm in a file, I'm drafting a motion, I'm doing whatever. And there's other hours that I can use for meeting time, for planning big picture stuff, for, those kind of things. I try to do that with my private time as well. Mm-hmm. There's going to be times and events that I'm going to be there for my family, or I'm going to stay in the routine of medical appointments or whatever it might be. But I'm going to build in that time where someone's going to need me and I want to be able to be there. Someone's going to invite me to something. I want to be able to be there. They're giving me an opportunity to sponsor an event. They're giving me an opportunity to come speak, to come meet people. I want to be able to jump into that.
Right. Or there's a massive fire thrown in your lap and you have to deal with that. So speaking of, this is probably our last question that we can get out before we have to start wrapping things up. But how do you deal with that when you get a massive fire dumped in your lap? Somebody says, hey, here's a huge problem. The adrenaline hits. And then what's next?
So 2 things. One, you helped me learn, which was keep your mouth closed until you thought about it. Processed, I love our EOS coach used the little snow globe, right?
Right.
Like spin it, let the glitter settle, and then say what you're going to say. So I've learned that to just kind of not have that, oh crud moment,
Right.
like make sure you guard your words and don't say anything in that moment. But I'm a very action-oriented person. Mm-hmm. I think that's part of why Ryan and I complement each other so well. Like he's the person that if I've had a bad day, he's the soft landing, it's okay. Right. You're still amazing, whatever, the reassuring and the going through the feelings. If somebody comes to me and they're like, this happened or this is going on, my immediate thought is, how do we address it? Where's the solution? How do we problem solve? I'm not going to stop until I've fixed it. And amazingly, throughout the years, and I've tried to teach this to the young associates and interns that we've worked with, you can get really far in life just asking for grace. Thankfully, we're not in a workspace where a lot of deadlines are missed and things like that. But I've been there before. And it's amazing what falling on your sword and calling somebody and asking for an extension, half the time they'll give it to you. Yeah. And so I try to teach that, and I try to find those opportunities of, okay, can I kind of bend the rules a bit, or can I ask for grace, or can I, is there anything within my power to immediately remedy this by agreement? If there's not, then okay, what's the motion we need to file? What's the, home situation, whatever we need to deal with? What's the solution given, this fact set.
Awesome. Love it. Okay. Well, I'm a book guy. I always ask. Always ask. Give me your top 1 or 2 books.
I think the 2 that have probably made the one that's made the biggest difference was the Who Not How. I never shy away from responsibility.
Right.
I never say that's too much, or I'm like, okay, give me more, until I kind of can't.
Right.
And especially now that I am prioritizing my health, I'm prioritizing rest, I'm prioritizing all these other things that I've always wanted to, the slack has to go somewhere, and if that means hiring someone for a service, if that means hiring more staff to take on more responsibilities, that's really opened up my frame of mind. It's not failure to not do it all. It's absolutely a part of success, and getting to do more of the things I'm actually really good at, doing more of the things that I can do to add value if I hand off some of the other stuff.
Awesome. All right, Rocio, we are out of time. I'm sure we will have a part 2 and 3 and 4. But thank you all for tuning in to the Driven Crowd podcast. We will see you next time. Thanks.